This is a screenshot of a statement during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. It was posted to the Adventist Review website regarding the Adventist health message in light of the pandemic. It says, "I see all kinds of people sick and dying from COVID-19, no matter what we try to do to prevent its spread. But it seems that Adventists respond just by saying stuff to make their ridiculous health message seem relevant." What do you think about that statement? We're going to get into that in a moment, but first, I want to tell you a quick story. Most people don't know about it, but on October 23rd, 2022, in Brussels, Belgium, they had another one. Another what, you might ask? Another meeting to prepare for the next pandemic. The reason why I said another one is because a similar meeting took place 3 years ago, on October 18th, 2019. It was called Event 201, and it was a sort of war game simulation for pandemics to basically mimic what would happen if a respiratory virus were to spread around the world. And sure enough, a few months later, we all found ourselves thrust into a world that completely changed as countries around the world locked down in an attempt to stop the spread of a novel coronavirus that we now know as COVID-19. And now, here we are, 3 years later, and another meeting has taken place to prepare for what they believe will be another respiratory virus projected to emerge in the future, and how the world should prepare. During this recent simulation that was called the catastrophic contagion, they discussed something called SEERS, which is an acronym for Severe Epidemic Enterovirus Respiratory Syndrome 2025. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, this is a fictional scenario, a fictional virus that could possibly emerge in 2025. Now honestly, I have no idea if SEERS will even be a thing. But what I can say for sure is that in addition to being the Messiah, Jesus was a seer, which is an Old Testament word for a prophet. And he foresaw all of this and warned us by stating that there would be famines and pestilences. And notice that this word is plural, pestilences, or as we call them today, pandemics. Once again, plural. Based on Christ's prophecy, I am sure that there will be more pandemics before it's all said and done. Christ didn't give us the details regarding exactly how these pandemics would emerge, whether they were naturally occurring or concocted in a lab. But he did say that they would emerge. And I believe he didn't give us those details because he understood that when it comes to his people, the source of the pandemics and pestilences are not what's most important, but rather what's more important is how his people respond to those pandemics. In April of 2020, my heart filled with sanctified pride as I watched a discussion put on by the church leaders to discuss the pandemic in light of the history of the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. I learned for the first time about the Adventist success during this time and how our health principles were put to the test as our sanitariums saw tremendous success in saving lives while others were losing people by the thousands. I, along with many of you, learned about Hutchinson Adventist Seminary that saw a 100% success rate during the height of the pandemic. Now you have to remember that I was seeing all of this around April and May of 2020 when everyone was still figuring out this whole pandemic thing. But I waited with bated breath to see how the church would step into the forefront to declare our prior success and bring hope to so many who were living in fear, waiting for a vaccine that was over a year away. What would the world do for a year? Was God okay with us sitting and waiting along with everyone else? Surely we could step up in this moment. Surely our churches could become centers for education on the health principles that had worked in the past and were just as relevant today as they were 100 years ago. And instead of seeing what I had hoped for the most part, what I saw was closed churches and silent lips in regards to our health message. Now, there were of course people in our ranks that tried to show the relevancy of our health message. But the overwhelming reality was that for the most part, we as a people were just as terrified as everyone else. And we were waiting along with everyone else. It was all just so unspectacular. With each passing day, my frustration was growing. We were missing our opportunity to let our light shine. We were missing this opportunity to be spectacular. And what do I mean about being spectacular? Well, it would have looked like this. If Seventh-day Adventists practiced what they profess to believe, if they were sincere health reformers, they would indeed be, and here's the word that I'm looking for, a spectacle to the world, to angels, and to men. That's right. Jesus had warned us about the pandemics because he wanted us to be a spectacle. He wanted us to be spectacular. He wanted us to shine in the darkest of moments. But unfortunately, as we saw in the statement that I read in the beginning, many in our churches today feel as though our health message is, and I quote, ridiculous and irrelevant. But was and is our health message relevant in a world of pandemics? Should we just put it back on the shelf as a relic of days past? Again, I'm going to answer that statement in a moment, but before I do, I want you to know what I was thinking that summer of 2020 as I waited for us to be spectacular. I started thinking to myself, there must be some way to show how relevant our message is. Perhaps there was more to the story of the Adventist response to the 1918 pandemic that could arouse our people to be spectacular. And sure enough, there was more. As a matter of fact, there was so much more. The records preserved in the archives of the Review and Herald told the same story that I had heard at that symposium regarding the success at Hutchinson Adventist Seminary. Other schools like Kingsway College, Emmanuel Missionary School, now known as Andrews University, and South Lancaster Academy, one of the oldest Adventist schools, all telling the same story. Hundreds of students that were sick, and only one death. This was the story that we told in our docuseries Healthdemic, and highlighted in our video, A Viral Appeal to Adventists. These videos were born out of an attempt to tell our people their story, hoping that we could all be inspired to be spectacular. Here we were, in the summer of 2020 BV, before vaccine. Most people were still waiting in fear, waiting for this savior that was supposed to fix everything. And this hoped-for solution to stop the spread of COVID was still months away. And I'll let you decide if it fixed everything. So was our health message relevant in a 2020 COVID world? Well, the answer to that question is a resounding yes, as these articles from April of 2020 declared emphatically that the overwhelming majority of the people dying from COVID had pre-existing lifestyle diseases like diabetes and heart disease. You know, the same lifestyle diseases that Adventists who practice health reform don't develop nearly as much when compared to the general population. I mean, based on the fact that Adventists in Loma Linda, California are constantly highlighted for living the longest in the country, not having lifestyle diseases is kind of our thing. And this same lifestyle was highlighted on the cover of National Geographic and the Oprah Winfrey Show. But please, take a look at the evidence for yourself. New study highlights potential role of diet. That's nutrition. Exercise may strongly protect against poor COVID-19 outcomes. Exercise. Hydrothermotherapy in prevention and treatment of mild to moderate cases of COVID-19. Water. Dr. Anthony Fauci tells Matthew McConaughey sunlight kills COVID-19. That's sunshine. Influence of cigarettes and alcohol on the severity and death of COVID-19. That's temperance. Respiratory health for better COVID-19 outcomes. That's air. Why it's important to get a good night's sleep during the coronavirus outbreak. That's rest. And finally, stress and depression can potentially damage the efficacy of the COVID-19 vaccine. So, whether you're vaccinated or not, trust in divine power to help you deal with stress is relevant for everyone. Study after study and article after article has shown that every single point of the 8 laws of health, if followed, could have saved lives, and it is increasingly becoming clear that the pandemic merely exposed the healthdemic that was already ravaging the country. Think about that for a moment. From as far back as 1979, scientific studies have showed that within 16 days of living on a plant-based diet, people with diabetes could get off their insulin within a matter of weeks. Could you imagine the impact we could have had if as a people we did a nationwide or worldwide campaign to promote these health principles, to help people deal with their comorbidities, lessening their chances of having severe COVID? How many lives could have been saved? But unfortunately, instead of taking hold of this opportunity, the majority of us stayed silent. Certainly not all, but the majority. Perhaps afraid to rock the boat. Perhaps not thinking that our health message could have really made a difference. And so most of us went along with the status quo, as more and more people died without understanding that 94% of the people who were dying as a direct result of pre-existing health conditions, like diabetes and heart disease. It was just all so unspectacular. And so it went for months as the world waited for the vaccines to arrive, and so many remained huddled in their homes. What a contrast between what we saw in 1918, when the students at South Lancaster Academy, who according to the Review and Herald, were thanked for confidently going out into the community to assist in the work of treating the sick who were suffering from the Spanish flu. I believe this is part of God's calling for us. And as we get closer and closer to the second coming of Christ, according to the great controversy, the pestilences will get more and more frequent. We can no longer neglect the work of healing as it relates to the gospel commission. The healthdemic is still here. The comorbidities are not going anywhere. And when the next pandemic comes, I'm pretty sure they will play just as much of a role in the health outcomes as they did with COVID. As we move on from this pandemic, the establishment has already been looking forward to the next pandemic. They're looking forward to Sears and making preparation for what they believe will come. And what about us? Are we doing the same? The question that I want to pose to you today is, are we satisfied with the status quo? Are we satisfied with the unspectacular? Or have we learned that what God has given us was relevant in 1918, is relevant now, and will be relevant in the future when the next pandemic arrives? And that is not only relevant, but it has the potential to be spectacular if we embrace it. If they're preparing for another catastrophic contagion, then I believe that we too need to be preparing as well. The next pestilence should not catch us off guard again. Take a look at this quote. As religious aggression subverts the liberties of our nation, those who would stand for freedom of conscience will be placed in unfavorable positions. For their own sake, they should, while they have opportunity, become intelligent in regard to disease, its causes, prevention, and cure. Those who do this will find a field of labor anywhere. There will be suffering ones, plenty of them, who will need help, not only among those of our own faith, but largely among those who know not the truth. It should be clear that the lifestyle we are living and our health message will once again play a major role in the next pandemic, and this work will be connected to the loss of freedom of conscience prophesied in Revelation 13. We will have another chance to be spectacular. The only question that we need to answer individually is if we will embrace the call to preach, teach, and to heal. Then, and only then, can we become a spectacle to men and angels. In the next installment of this short series, we will take a look at how we responded as a people to the vaccine mandates that cost so many their jobs and livelihoods, and whether or not this was connected to freedom of conscience. Did we, who know that liberties will eventually be stripped away, respond in a spectacular fashion? Or did we simply go along with the status quo? So if you're interested in continuing this discussion, then subscribe to get updated on upcoming videos and share this video with others, and join me as we make another viral appeal to Adventists. God bless.